floors with Empire Today's $99 sale. Buy one room, get carpet, hardwood, or laminate in all of the rooms for only $99. That's new floors for the whole house.
Both sides now, America. Morning glory. Bonjour. Hi, it's Hugh Hewitt. Both sides now. I'm just committed to both sides now. If I had 10 hours, I would play you clips of Adam Schiff yesterday blowing up himself, even as his friends on Twitter were applauding, and the MSNBC and CNN audience were going, yeah. It was like me rooting for the Browns in the 49ers Green Bay Packers game. Really, it's delusional. It's delusional. There's a reason, by the way, the Mr. Peanut ad went viral yesterday. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we can play the audio, but you have to go look it up. I just tweeted it out. The Planters Peanut Super Bowl ad came out yesterday, and it went viral. Cut number 31. Here's the audio from it.
I just died in your arms tonight. Oh, look out! Oh, abandonment! We're too heavy. Oh.
Matt, let go.
No, you let go.
Hey, Mr. Peanut, no, you don't. Don't do it, Mr. Peanut. No! Maybe he'll be all right. Maybe not.
Mr. Peanut falls to his death. Matt Walsh, Wesley Snipes are on a road trip with Mr. Peanut. Now, why did that go viral yesterday? Because Americans are stone cold, bored to death with the Democrats. Bored to death. Woody Allen in Bananas summed up this trial, quote, trial in the Senate, cut number 1.
I object, Your Honor. This trial is a travesty. It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of two mockeries, of a sham. I move for a mistrial.
That's what it is. It's a mockery of a sham, of a mockery. Jay Sekulow, one of the president's lawyers, summed it all up, cut number 37.
Well, I'm sure he's fine. I've been in a hearing all day, as you all have been. So, I mean, I'm not going to have conversations about the president's mood. I think this whole fact that we're here is ridiculous. I mean, think about why we're here. I said that at the beginning of when we spoke yesterday, which seems like about 2 weeks ago. But the truth of the matter is, why are we here? Are we having an impeachment over a phone call? Or has this been a 3-year attempt to take down a president that was duly elected by the American people? And we're doing this with 10 months to go to a general election. Pretty dangerous for our republic, in my view.
Why not make a motion to dismiss if the decision gets changed?
Because I want to let them try their case, and we want to try our case. Because we believe that, without a question, the president will be acquitted. There is not a doubt. All right, one more.
Are you ruling out a motion to dismiss at any point in the trial?
Those of you that know me know I don't rule out anything. Nothing is ruled out. But at this point, the way the procedures are set up, at this point, here's what I believe is going to happen. It looks like they're going to spend tomorrow and Friday. And then I suspect we'll start on Saturday. And then we'll go probably another day or two. But who knows? I mean, we've got to make that determination with our team.
And then what do you think happens after that?
Then there's questions. 2 days of that. Then there's probably a half-day argument on will there be witnesses or not. So that's probably a day.
What's your prediction on where?
My prediction is the president of the United States will be acquitted of the.
On the witnesses.
Oh, you know what? I don't predict on witness. I'm prepared. All right.
You don't think the president tweeting during any of this is affecting the senators when they read the tweets?
I'm not concerned about that.
Some Republicans have said
Last question.
Found illuminating, enlightening. They're not saying that, obviously they automatically buy the Democrats' case, but does that concern you?
Illuminating, enlightening, and I'm not questioning what you're saying. They said I haven't had a chance. I mean, obviously I've been in the proceedings. Is there anything we learned today that we have not heard for the last 3 months?
Senator Kennedy said that if you took a poll example, 9 out of 10 senators would have absolutely no idea and the 10th would be lying. Are you concerned that...
What do you say?
He said 9 out of 10 senators would have no idea what really went on in the hearings and the 10th one would be lying. That's his...
Because the hearings don't make sense to people? Is that what they're saying?
No,
They
because
didn't
He's saying senators have
they're
learning stuff.
they're learning.
You know,
he's learned a lot, and a lot of
okay.
Republican senators have as well.
Okay. At the end of the day, I believe without question the President of the United States will be acquitted.
I love Jay Sekulow. I've known Jay a long time, and he's just kind of shrugging his shoulders at this whole fiasco that the Democrats have arranged. I think it's killing the Democrats. Now, look, there's a different point of view, and I'd love to hear from you. I don't normally take calls in the first hour. 1-800-520-1234. What do you think? We're getting, warnings from the other side. Joe Scarborough says we're going to get crushed. We don't know what's coming. Cut number 5, Joe Scarborough yesterday.
The Fox News bubble that these people live in. Because I remember growing up, and I remember reading an article about John Roberts, and I think it was Grover Norquist who explained the reason he was such a good student and so good on his feet in those hearings was, he said, when you were a conservative at Harvard Law School, if you opened your mouth, you knew you were going to get your head knocked off by the other students, so you had to have all of your arguments together. And that was always my belief, and I'm sure it was your belief too, that is, a small government conservative, when you were in college or law school, even in southern state schools, I found, you better have your arguments together or you're going to get your head knocked off. Whereas a lot of liberals could just be lazy intellectually, argue whatever they wanted to argue, and whether it was in academia or whether it was in newsrooms or whether it was in Hollywood, they would be, they'd get confirmation. Oh, that's so smart. That's so insightful. And so as a conservative, you always had to be sharper. Here, and I think it's why conservatives learned how to win elections so much more effectively than Democrats. Now here we are in 2020, and it's the Trumpists, it's the conservatives, it's the right wing that's created this bubble. They go into that bubble. They don't know what exists outside of that bubble as far as for making arguments. We saw this of Mitt Romney in 2012. He watched Fox News. He looked at Gallup polls and was sure he was going to win when the rest of America knew he was headed to defeat. Isn't that bizarre that conservatives have now, like liberals used to, created their own echo chamber online, on Fox News, in newspapers of their choice, and it allows them to live very comfortably in their 42%. They have no idea what's coming in November.
All right, now I point out that on today's show, by the way, there is never a genuine conservative on Morning Joe. Because I can't go on. I'm always happy to go on, but I'm doing my radio show at the same time. There's not a genuine conservative ever. Noah Rothman is the closest, and they've kind of cut back on him once in a while, Matt Continetti, but generally never a conservative on there. Today I'm welcoming Nicholas Kirstof, New York Times liberal columnist. I'm welcoming Jonah Goldberg. He's a conservative, but he's a never-Trumper. Almost ever Trumper, I guess. I'm welcoming Chuck Todd, host of the Meet the Press. I think he's a fair and square journalist, but a lot of you don't. I have everybody on this show. I've got Dr. Michael Oren from Iran coming on, from Isreal coming on, talking about Iran. I've got General David Deptula. Conservatives don't live in a bubble. That was projection. That was projection about the people who think there's an impeachable offense. Lindsey Graham finally blew up yesterday. Cut number 10.
They withdrew from the the Deputy National Security Advisor case, where the Deputy National Security Advisor went to court and said, "Tell me what to do, Judge." The House actually withdrew the subpoena because they didn't want the court process to stop the impeachment train. They would have the United States Senate create an impeachment process where the president would not be allowed to go to Article III courts to argue privileges that have been argued in every other impeachment trial and have been argued by presidents since George Washington. That would destroy the institution of the presidency as we know it. What would it do? It would allow a handful and a 300 plus million country people along partisan lines to impeach a president without independent judicial review. Before I came here, I used to try cases. We have a lot of good lawyers in this body. All I can say is that when the court date was set, and if I showed up and asked for a bunch of subpoenas and documents to be produced on the day of trial that I had not pursued before the trial in any serious way, I ought to get tossed out.
And
What
Lindsey
did we do
Graham
yesterday?
went off on the Democrats yesterday. I think they're losing a vote a day from Republicans. But you know what? Joe Scarborough thinks I'm living in a bubble. No, I'm paying attention to Jeff Toobin and CNN and MSNBC and all the liberals at my colleagues at the Washington Post opinion pages. The president has already won. They don't know it. I think he's already won in November as well. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Would seek judicial redress, and it literally would stop them impeaching him before the election. It's an impeachment that's all going to be done by the House and the Senate without any independent politicians. Because I really do believe the best
Don't walk out, you senators. You're not supposed to be wandering around the chambers. Good morning. It's Hugh Hewitt. I hope you are having a better day than the United States Senate. They are stunned and confused, dazed, and wandering around because zombie-like they have been forced to listen to Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler for 8 hours, and it continues today. Meanwhile, in real news, 2 more Chinese cities, 2 more, were put on lockdown by the government authorities, expanding an unprecedented experiment to try to contain a fast-spreading virus that has killed at least 17 people and infected more than 500. On Thursday, authorities in Huanggang, a city of 7.5 million people, said they won't let long-distance trains and buses run from the urban center and will shut its public transportation system in the lockdown zone effective midnight Friday local time. Ezhou, another neighboring city with just over 1 million residents, said it would enact similar restrictions. What they are trying to do is get ahead of the human-to-human spread of a virus that kills at about the same rate as the Spanish flu. It's not as deadly as MERS or SARS, but it's a bad bug. It's in the coronavirus family. It's called the Wuhan virus. And I've been following it since Monday, and I'll keep following it. But I also want to hear from you. What did you think of yesterday? Mike in Fort Worth, Texas. Mike, what did you think of yesterday?
I didn't watch a whole lot of it, Hugh, but my comment, Trump's not being impeached just because of that phone call. He's being impeached because a culmination of things. The Hollywood assets take the Kwan family.
All right, thanks, Mike. You're right and you're wrong. You're right and you're wrong. He's just being impeached because the Democrats are trying to win the next election. John, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sinai Nakwa, without saying so. John, yesterday I had a Steelers fan call me. He told me that was a soup, and then another one said, no, that's an Italian dessert, Sinai Nakwa. What do you think? You're a Steelers fan, right?
Yes, I am.
I knew it. Do you know what Sinai Nakwa non means?
I have no idea.
I knew it. At least you're not.
I know what Permane sandwiches are, but I don't know.
How about sua sponte? That's what Carl thought was a soup, and then he said, no, I'm wrong, and it's an Italian dessert, sua sponte. Never mind, John. What are you calling about?
You're throwing me off. You're a lawyer, Lou. You're a lawyer. I got one question for you, please. The mantra of the Democrats since the beginning has been, no one is above the law. My question is, what law has the president tried to be above?
He has not tried to be above any law. It is a complete sham. It is in tatters. They're quote, abuse of power. By the way, you do, as a matter of constitutional law, you do not need to commit a crime to be impeached, but you do have to have an impeachable offense. They have not articulated a standard. He's not trying to be above the law. When I read the transcript, I said immediately, not only is there no impeachable offense here, there's no offense. And they've been trying to persuade you that there is. Just read the transcript. Thank you, my friend. You mentioned I'm a lawyer. My friend Perry Cronin at Axiom Tax Resolution is also a lawyer. And Perry loves to talk to you if you've got tax problems. He's very good at this. Very good at this. If you owe more than $10,000 in federal taxes and you're ready to find out how to get out of trouble, Perry Cronin is the one who can help you if anyone can. He can help you get relief from the IRS rapidly. Call him today. One conversation with Perry could change everything. You can call him at 844-8-TAX-PRO, 844-8-TAX-PRO, or go online to Axiom Tax Resolution at axtaxhelp.com. That's axtaxhelp.com. I talked to Perry about this. I said, I've got a very affluent, very, very smart audience. I don't think many of them are in tax trouble. And he said, you have no idea who gets into tax trouble. And I believe him. So I'm not, no judgment here, just straight common sense lawyer to friends who listen to me. If you've got tax problems, Perry Cronin, axtaxhelp.com. Deb in Denver, you got 30 seconds. Deb, what do you think of yesterday?
I think it's horrible. I think the American people expect more of the Senate than to have these kind of lies being perpetuated for 24 hours. I think the American people, a whole lot of them, go about their daily lives and they trusted the news. And so when all they see is what Schiff is saying and Nadler are saying, they actually think it's true. And
I will tell you right now, you're exactly right, Deb. I'm coming right back, America. Dr. Michael Oren joins me. I believe he's next from Isreal. Don't go anywhere. It's the next Hugh Hewitt Show, hour ahead.
Why do I even bother printing off run sheets? Oren is in the last segment of the hour. You know, next time, maybe I'll print off a run sheet. I have, but, whatever. By the way, since we are open here, not talking
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I've just decided this is Jonah Goldberg's new bump music. Make him note of that, Adam, please. Let's bump in Jonah next hour with this, because if we couldn't laugh, we'd all go insane. Really, I've been in the Beltway all week, and I have been doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm doing it again today. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people who matter, people who are making policy. Last night I was Secretary of Education DeVos and I in front of 400 Colorado Christian University students talking about Espinoza versus Montana, a case at the Supreme Court yesterday. Visited with a very senior former official yesterday, the day before. Dinner with one of the leading philanthropists in Washington, D.C., talking about the Nixon Foundation. Today I'm doing stuff on the Hill, and tonight I'm doing stuff on foreign policy. When I'm in the Beltway, I'm going 100,000 miles per hour, and it's freezing. And meanwhile, in the background is playing this insane impeachment fiasco charade. And Mr. Peanut died. So it was a lot of news yesterday, and coronavirus, the Wuhan strain is spreading, and people don't really want to get their arms around that yet. But then Lindsey Graham does what he always does, goes to a microphone, and it's wearing on Lindsey. The Kavanaugh hearing followed by, he loves the Senate, he loves the Congress, he loves the country, he likes the president, and what is happening is like the Roman Revolution. Every day that goes by, another iteration of destructive disposition of the mos maiorum, the way things are done. And Lindsey Graham is beginning to fear the worst. And he let it out yesterday, cut 38.
That's one of the things that got Nixon in trouble. He fired the prosecutor. So here's what I saw yesterday. I saw an effort to ask the Senate to ignore every privilege that President Clinton was able to exercise, Nixon was able to exercise, and to suggest to the Senate that an independent judiciary really is a non-player. If I were the president, I wouldn't cooperate with these guys at all. I'm the same guy that said, you can't fire Mueller. I encouraged him to work with Mueller. Mueller is a man of the law. Schiff, Nadler, and Pelosi impeached this president in 48 days. I wouldn't give them the time of day. They're on a crusade to destroy this man. And they don't care what they destroy in the process of trying to destroy Donald Trump. I do care. So to my Democratic colleagues, you can say what you want about me, but I'm covering up nothing. I'm exposing your hatred of this president to the point that you would destroy the institution. Nobody would be saying this about a Democratic president if a Republican House had done this. You wouldn't even ask me that question. All of you would be in our face saying that there's a Democratic president and you're denying that person, he or she, a chance to go to court and litigate these matters because you hate them so much. It shows you how complicit people have become when it comes to Trump. Not one question about the idea that a Democratic-controlled House in 48 days impeached the President of the United States with a process where you couldn't have a lawyer, couldn't call a witness. And they hold it against him because he wants to object to turning over documents to them. You would be all over us. So let me tell you what's going to happen in November. This won't matter much. People are going to judge the president about what he's done and what he can do. And they're going to look at the Democratic alternative and ask, will I be better off with this person versus Trump? But I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember this for a very long time. No good deed goes unpunished around this place. Wait a minute. Working with my Democratic colleagues, I tried to give Mueller the space to do his job, and I told the president to his face, if it's proven you worked with the Russians, or you sought something from the Russians and got it, that's it for me and you. Now, the same people that patted me on the back are asking me to railroad the guy, to legitimize a process in the House that will destroy the presidency over time. I will not be part of that. And you need to ask yourself some questions. Would you be asking different questions if this were a Democratic president treated so poorly by a Republican House? Because I remember Clinton very well. We got challenged, rightly so, about what we were doing and why we were doing it. So I wouldn't cooperate at all with these people if I were the president.
Lindsey Graham, bravo. Now, Adam Schiff, I want to be fair. Adam Schiff is trying to tell people we are not going to go witness reciprocity. Now, I believe that if the Democrats move for a witness, the president's lawyers can move for a witness, and then the president's lawyer have the right for first mover. So if the Democrats are first mover, not only do they get one witness, the president's team gets one witness. And the president team also gets the right to be first mover, which would allow the Democrats to call a second witness. So I think they should come in flights of 4. That's Hugh Hewitt's view. Adam Schiff on this idea that there's witness reciprocity of any sort. I just call it simple procedural due process. Procedural due process. Adam Schiff said this yesterday, cut 11.
This isn't like some fantasy football trade, as I said yesterday. This isn't, we'll offer you this if you'll give us that. We'll offer you a witness that is irrelevant and immaterial, who has no relevant testimony, but a witness that will allow us to smear a presidential candidate if you want to get a legitimate witness. That's not a trade. Trials aren't trades for witnesses. We offered last night to have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
He's trying to preempt witnesses from the press. He wants it really to be even more perversely unbalanced than it is already. Worst thing he said yesterday, he does not want this to be decided at the ballot box, cut number 14.
On the basis of this egregious misconduct, the House of Representatives returned 2 articles of impeachment against the president. First, charging that President Trump corruptly abused the powers of the presidency to solicit foreign interference in the upcoming presidential election for his personal political benefit. And second, President Trump obstructed an impeachment inquiry into that abuse of power in order to cover up his misconduct. The House did not take this extraordinary step lightly. As we will discuss, impeachment exists for cases in which the conduct of the president rises beyond mere policy disputes to be decided otherwise and without urgency at the ballot box. Instead, we are here today to consider a much more grave matter, and that is an attempt to use the powers of the presidency to cheat in an election. For precisely this reason, the president's misconduct cannot be decided at the ballot box, for we cannot be assured that the vote will be fairly won.
All right, stop right there. He is saying the president's going to cheat and that somehow the government is going to rig the election. This is just the height of irresponsibility. This is everything they accused Donald Trump of in 2016, not accepting the result of an election. It's crazy. It is setting them up to impeach him a second time, and they ought to get their clocks clean politically. What's this doing to the markets? Well, not as much as the spread of the virus in China is. This is brought to you by Birch Gold Group. As you know, Fox Business published an article on how the world's richest people are diversifying. They're buying precious metals. Goldman Sachs says gold could surge past $1,600 an ounce this year. Right now it is trading this morning at $1,553. That'd be a pretty significant price rise for gold in 1 year. And so if you're not diversified, you should. You should put a portion of your savings into an IRA backed by precious metals. You might want to buy just actual physical gold. You can do either with Birch Gold, and you can do them both through HughGold.com. Either diversify your IRA. They'll send you a free information kit on converting your eligible IRA or 401k into a precious metal IRA. Or if you want to buy gold or silver, minimum purchase is $5,000. You call 800-434-GOLD. 800-434-GOLD. Get the information, be diversified, be protected. There are a lot of people in China that wish they had done that. The Hong Kong index down almost 3% on Monday, rebounded a little bit in the 2 days in between. This morning it's off 1.5%. Why? They know this is bad. I'm hoping they keep it contained in China, but it's going to really dent the Chinese economy. 10-year Treasury in the United States is down to 1.77. Yesterday, the Dow was off 9 points. The NASDAQ was up 12, and the S&P was up 1. This morning, the S&P is down 1 again. The Dow is down 26 in pre-market trading. The NASDAQ is up 5.5 points. It's not really having much of an impact here, but it's having quite a lot of impact abroad. Birch Gold Group can help you be protected against pandemics, earthquakes, stock market shocks, panics. They've got a AAA rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews. Just go to HughGold.com. That's HughGold.com. President wasn't quiet yesterday. President was not quiet. He was talking at Davos. Just a little bit of the president, please. Cut number 4.
Gerald Nadler, I've known him a long time. He's a sleazebag. Everybody knows that. Pat Cipollone is a high-quality human being. I was very impressed with Pat. He had great emotion yesterday. Pat's a brilliant guy, but I've never seen that emotion. And that's real emotion. That's because he knows this is a hoax.
I just love that. My guys are good. Their guys are a sham. He also talked about Virginia and what Governor Northam's gun bit is doing. Cut number 6.
I think it's crazy, and I think Virginia is crazy. They want to take away the guns in Virginia. You have a governor that's, I just can't believe it. But Virginia is very much in play. I think we're going to win the state of Virginia. They want to take everyone's gun away in Virginia. You can't do it. You can't do it. People need that for safety. They need it for hunting.
Mary Lou in Winter Park, Florida. You got 30 seconds, Mary Lou. What's on your mind?
Well, I just had a summation of the Democrat arguments yesterday, and they were incompetent, irrelevant, immaterial, innocuous, imbecilic, immoral, irreverent, ignoble, and impotent.
All right. That's. I think you got it right. Thank you, Mary Lou. Time for me to tell you about ReliefFactor.com. There it is. You hear it. That time of the day. You can see the bag if you're watching on Univision or Town Hall TV. 4 pills. There's my lukewarm coffee right there. And down the hatch it goes. Now listen to me and listen closely. If you don't take your Icarian, Curcumin, Resveratrol, and especially your Omega every day, you are losing the game. You're falling behind. The only natural supplement I take, the only thing other than vitamin, the only thing I take that is over the counter, the only thing, I can't take the NSAIDs at all, and I want some help, and so I get it from ReliefFactor.com. Pete and Seth Talbot created this to benefit you, just like they created HonorBoundCoffee.com to benefit military families, but you cannot be benefited until you sign up. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Michael Oren is next. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Joined from Israel by Dr. Michael Oren, former ambassador of that great state of Israel to the United States. Good morning, Dr. Oren. How are you?
I'm great, Hugh.
I received a letter yesterday from a retired general who said the American media does not understand the strategic significance of the death of Soleimani, that it has thrown Iran into chaos, that he was not only their second most important leader, he was the man playing multidimensional chess that no one else can understand what he was up to. It was all personal relationship based, and that they are in chaos. Agree or disagree?
Agree. I think it's an emperor news clothes moment, and President Trump simply tore the clothes off the Iranian regime. It shows that they're weak. Shows that they were vulnerable. It shows that they were incompetent. They turned around and shot down a civilian airliner. And when they fired back, largely ineffectually. All that talk about war was ridiculous, and Iran today is a much worse situation. Just ask Israelis and ask Arabs. Israelis on the left side of the spectrum, right side of the spectrum, Arabs throughout the region all applauded this move. What was the downside? None of us can figure it out.
Okay, now I do believe part of the equation that people haven't factored in yet. Iran's willingness to launch ballistic missiles from their territory onto the sovereign territory of another country, I believe increases the argument for a preemptive action against them should they near nuclear breakout, because they have demonstrated a willingness to do the predicate of that nuclear breakout being dangerous, which is put them onto ICBMs and send them somewhere. Do you agree with that assessment, Michael Oren?
I agree, but I think it's just the beginning. I mean, here you have a country that was prepared to carry out a terrorist attack in the capital of the United States of America to assassinate at least one ambassador, perhaps two, myself being the second, and that has tried to conduct terrorist attacks in Western Europe, has succeeded in carrying out terrorist attacks in Eastern Europe. The ballistic missile can be Exhibit A, but it's only Exhibit A. The exhibits go up to Z, and I don't think you need much of a pretext if you're looking for an actual legitimate legal pretext for striking Iran. I think the rap sheet would go on for many, many pages.
Now, also yesterday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and I always tell people when I'm doing this, my son works at State Department, so you can discount my praise of Pompeo if you want, but I want to applaud him for this quote. Quote, "We applaud the announcement of Colombia, Honduras, and Guatemala to designate Iran-backed Hezbollah a terrorist organization." Pompeo continued, "It and other transnational terrorist groups remain active in the region. The U.S. continues to rally international support to counter these threats." How important is it that South America join the United States, Israel, and other Arab nations in the region to identify and isolate Hezbollah as well as Iran? Because I think it's just two sides of the same coin.
It is entirely, it's a completely artificial distinction between Hezbollah, a political organization, Hezbollah, a terrorist organization. I think Hezbollah itself doesn't make that distinction. You had the German parliament voting the same way. German government has yet to make a decision. I hope that Angela Merkel will make that decision. But these voices, whether from Latin America or a few voices from Europe that are calling Hezbollah precisely what it is, are voices of moral clarity in the world, and we have to applaud them.
Now, the last question, Michael Oren. Boris Johnson said what we need is a new Trump deal with Iran. A Trump deal with Iran would be significantly different than the JCPOA. But do you think it's really possible? I don't believe the Islamic State really wants to deal with anyone, but what do you think?
Well, the danger is that it would cut a deal that's not significantly different from the JCPOA. And that would be a danger. And I've said on this program many times, this is why I believe that Israel should come out and state unequivocally what our expectations and interests are in such a deal, which would be an end to the nuclear program, an end to support for terror, an end from efforts to destroy us, the end of the ballistic missile system, coming clean on nuclear blueprints, all these lists. Will they do it? They aren't going to go quietly into that dark night, certainly. But we have to start making the case. Today we have the leaders from 49 states in Israel to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. I think that Israel should be making the case saying, okay, you want to fight anti-Semitism, you want to put an end to the memory of that, you want to commemorate the Holocaust, how about not giving hundreds of billions of dollars to a regime that denies the Holocaust, that's trying to kill 6
point.
million Jews in Israel today. How
All right,
about
very,
that?
very quickly, the UAE has announced that they're screening passengers on China flights after the outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus. Has Israel taken any steps like that yet, Dr. Oren?
No, not yet.
You expect them to be quickly...
We got a problem with the Nile virus.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, Nile virus and flu.
Oh,
Really,
okay.
yeah.
Michael
Least of our
Oren,
problems.
always
All
a
right.
pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for clarity. I always like talking to Michael Oren. Clarity, clarity, clarity reigns. Don't go anywhere, America. Next hour, more on the impeachment. Jonah Goldberg joins me as well. I'll also be joined by Chuck Todd in hour number 3. We do everybody here. We talk to everyone here, and I want you to always understand both sides now is our rule, all right? And our fond farewell to Archbishop Charles Chaput of Philadelphia, whose richly deserved retirement is being announced today. He's not going to quit the race. He's just going to quit the grind. He's not going to retire from the field. He's just going to retire from the Archbishop's chair in Philadelphia, which he has so faithfully and terrifically served for so many years, and Denver before it. Congratulations, Archbishop Chaput. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside a warming up beltway. It's finally starting to get to a decent level of temperature here. So a good day ahead. I want to welcome General David Deptula. Lieutenant General Deptula is retired from the United States Air Force. He is dean now of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. He joins me to talk about strategery and military matters as often as I can get him. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Very good. How about you?
Great. I want to talk a little bit about Iran. I got an email from a retired member or general of a different branch who wrote to me some thoughts on Soleimani's death. Everyone is replaceable, he wrote, but not all replacements have the same capabilities and capacities. Major describes the situation this way, and maybe a very good analogy. Soleimani was playing speed chess. He was working multiple boards against multiple opponents. In that regard, he was not only managing each individual game, but to the best of our knowledge, he was the only mind that was orchestrating the complex outcomes into some kind of cohesive whole. Now, not just each game is disrupted, but the orchestration is disrupted. It goes on to expand that the loss of Soleimani really hasn't registered in the West yet. What do you make of this, General Deptula?
Well, I think the individual who sent you that information is very accurate. Let me also add that yesterday at the Mitchell Institute, we had speak to us Major General Grinkowicz, who is currently the deputy commander of the Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, which is charged with dealing with the Islamic State. Of which is a huge problem in the region. He's also the commander of all the air forces in the Levant and Iraq, and he gave us some insight into the impact of the loss of Soleimani. And just like your contributor mentioned, and what I like to tell people and remind them is that leadership matters and individuals do matter. And yeah, he might have a replacement, but what the general on active duty who just came over from Iraq told us was that Soleimani, well, first let me do it this way. There are over 100 different Iranian-supported militia groups in Iraq, in Syria, and throughout the region. And what Soleimani was a master at doing is providing them direction and keeping them all aligned for unified action. Now he's gone, so it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to regain the kind of leadership that Soleimani provided and the connections that he had to keep all these groups under control, if you will, or headed in the direction that Iran wants them to go. Now, that could be good, that could be bad. We don't know, because he had the ability to control them and restrain action when necessary, and then to commit to action when he wanted. So we've yet to see the dramatic impact of his loss in the region.
You know, General Deptula, I tried to make the analogy to another friend. It was like the death of Yamamoto in World War II, and they said, no, Yamamoto only ran the Japanese Imperial Navy. The army was different, the Nazis were different, the Italians were different. He had one big part of a very big war. Soleimani had every aspect of Iran's multinational, multi-level combat with the West under direct control, and he had a relationship with the supreme leader that no successor is going to have.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it will, in the near term, absolutely. Over the long term, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see if Soleimani's replacement can step into his shoes and pick up where he left off. But most folks who are familiar with the region, the general who visited us yesterday, doubt that kind of relationship, that kind of persuasive capability that Soleimani had over these militia groups will not be able to be reconstituted anytime soon. Soleimani had a persona and he had a charisma. He could speak Arabic very fluently as well as Farsi. That's not the case with his follow-on That's very fundamental, but it's also something that builds trust and capability that if you don't have, it's kind of hard to reestablish and regain.
Yeah, intelligence has its own charisma, competence has its own charisma, but charisma has its own charisma, and he had undeniable charisma among the Shiite world, and now he's gone. So the next question, why didn't we do it 5 years ago?
Well, that's an extraordinarily important equation. What happened? Well, part of the reason we didn't do it 5 years ago is we had a different set of political leadership here in the United States who not only didn't lay down hard red lines that once crossed, they acted. But that's how I would tell you the Russians got a toehold back into the Mideast region is because of the former administration's lack of resolve and stepping up and supporting the actions that they said they would take if certain red lines were crossed. I'm specifically talking about what happened with respect to Assad using chemical weapons and the lack of action when they did by the Obama administration, which then gave the Russians the entree to move into the region because they basically said, hey, if the U.S. isn't going to act, there's no threat. They're not going to push back if we move into the region, so there we go. So some of these basic issues make a difference when it comes to world politics. With respect to Soleimani, you had a very risk-averse previous administration, and in fact, they played into the Iranian hands by negotiating the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement with them, which did nothing but just push the Iranians' capability to develop a nuclear weapon down the road.
Now, I want to switch subjects on you very quickly, General. Yesterday, Admiral Stavridis and I just spent 2 minutes talking about the Wuhan coronavirus. Chinese movies are being canceled. Chinese cities, including one of 7.5 million, in addition to Wuhan, are locked down. The military plans for this sort of thing because the Spanish flu decimated our troops in 1918 to 1920. What do you make of the early response in the United States to this? Are we playing it about right, or ought we to be setting up a few more flares?
I think we're playing it about right. I think people are paying appropriate attention. They're taking action to take a look at, monitor people who are coming in from suspect areas. And I think it's a prudent action that we need to continue to move in that regard. And depending upon the severity of what happens, we should respond accordingly.
Does the Joint Staff take note of such a pandemic potential? Is that an issue that will rise up to the chairman? Will it be in the tank? Will it, or do you have to be summoned by the White House to the game? Eventually, the military got involved with the Ebola situation. What do you think?
No, these kinds of issues are monitored in the Department of Defense and in across the board. I mean, the chairman gets briefed on a daily basis of what's going on around the world, and this clearly would get to his attention. With respect to actions that are taken, that's all dependent upon the severity of the conditions and how U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines may be affected.
General David Deptula, always a pleasure. Talk to you again soon. Follow him on Twitter at Deptula_David. It's an easy one to remember, at Deptula_David. Time for me to find out whether or not the Chinese markets are recovering. They're not. This is brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. Together they are AndrewandTodd.com. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Their phone number, for those of you who just want to call them, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. Best thing to do is to go to their website, AndrewandTodd.com, AndrewandTodd.com, and have them review what your situation is with your house, especially if you need to get money out of your house for any reason whatsoever. They're the masters of refinance. AndrewandTodd.com, the 10-year Treasury is at 1.77%, so you will get great rates right now. Yesterday, the Dow was down 9, the NASDAQ was up 12, and the S&P was up just about a point. This morning, the S&P has moved into green territory from last hour. It's now up a point. The NASDAQ is up 9 at this hour. The overall market, Dow, is still in red as Amazon, my proxy for the tech sector, is in the pre-market trading down $4.50. I'd also point out that overnight, the Hong Kong index, reflecting uncertainty in China about the SARS virus, dropped another 1.5%. They're really going to suffer in China. You can take advantage of that by going to andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172. Go and do it today and come right back after the break to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Driving around Northern Virginia yesterday, I heard Mike Bloomberg ads. Because early voting is underway, excused absentee early voting. And so Bloomberg's just pouring money onto people. But here's the deal. It was on the news talk station. And that's great, but a news talk station isn't going to change anybody's mind. People who listen to news talk have already made up their mind. I thought to myself, I wonder why he isn't on conservative talk. And it's because it's an unimaginative ad buyer. They could find a lot of Republican votes. We know the president's going to be nominated. So what do we want? Some people want the weakest nominee, and they'll go vote for Elizabeth Warren. Some people want the clearest choice, like me, and I voted for Bernie Sanders. Some people, though, would like an alternative to the president, and they would vote for Mike Bloomberg. But I don't think Bloomberg is savvy enough to run his ad campaign on conservative talk radio, which he should be doing. But I can't help him out. Steve Scalise is the House Republican whip, number 2 in the House. Talked about Adam Schiff yesterday, played a montage of Adam Schiff. Steve Scalise is not impressed with the credibility of Adam Schiff. Cut number 20.
All you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now.
And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it. On this and on that.
But it's using the president's own words. So if he's...
Well, those weren't the president's words. It was an interpretation of the president's words. They're saying he made this up.
He did not make it up.
We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower.
I want to thank the Inspector General. In the absence of his actions and coming to our committee, we might not have even known there was a whistleblower complaint.
Steve Scalise just pointing out that Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi just lied. Yesterday, Joe Lockhart, former White House press secretary, said on CNN, or tweeted out, that 2 Republican senators had been overheard saying, I didn't know any of this. Did you hear that? It got like 3,000 retweets. He then came out and said, I made that up, but it was, they were thinking it. Just, fake news. It had been retweeted 3,000 times. The retraction by Joe Lockhart got about 300 retweets. That's what fake news is. It's really astonishing. Let me replay for you what Gordon Sondland actually said during his testimony, because he's going to come up again today and again tomorrow as they continue to drone on the House, in the Senate floor. Cut number 23, Ambassador Gordon Sondland.
To be clear here, ultimately the aid was lifted on September 11th. There was never any announcement by the Ukrainians about any investigations they were going to do, correct?
Correct.
The Ukrainians never, to your knowledge, started any of these investigations, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Consequently, these allegations that there was a quid pro quo that had to be enforced before the aid was released, and it never came to fruition, right?
I don't believe so.
Yep, you're right. More Gordon Sondland. Cut number 25.
Good morning, Ambassador. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Castor.
Welcome back. You're here all day on the 17th, late into the night, so thank you for your cooperation with the investigation. Did the president ever tell you personally about any preconditions for anything?
No.
Okay, so the president never told you about any preconditions for the aid to be released?
No.
The president never told you about any preconditions for a White House meeting?
Personally, no.
And more Gordon Sondland. Cut number 26.
So you didn't talk to President Trump when Ambassador Taylor says that that's what you told him? Is that your testimony here?
My testimony is I never heard from President Trump that aid was conditioned on an announcement of elections.
So
and one
you
more
never heard
Gordon
those.
Sondland. Cut number 28.
President Trump, when I asked him the open-ended question, as I testified previously, what do you want from Ukraine? His answer was, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing. That's all I got from President Trump.
All right. They avoided that yesterday, but we're not going to avoid it here. Jonah Goldberg is next, America. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. This is the new Jonah Goldberg bump music. If we couldn't laugh, we'd all go insane. Jonah is co-founder, along with Stephen Hayes, of the brand new The Dispatch, and he joins me. Good morning, Jonah. How are you?
Morning, Hugh. Good to talk to you.
How do you like your new bump music?
I like it. I mean, I can't believe you guys didn't go with Indigata Davida, the full instrumental version for me. But,
no, I think Jimmy Buffett is just perfect for you. Jonah's also author of Suicide of the West, one of my favorite books of the last few years, in which he discusses the miracle, which is our constitutionally ordered liberty. And so I just wanted to check in with Jonah and get his sense of what is going on right now in the Senate. Jonah, it's not a debate, it's an interview. What do you think is happening?
I think that my friend Yuval Levin, who predicted that impeachment would be bad for all of our institutions and bad for the country, was right. I think that Donald Trump got us into this mess as much, if not more so, than the Democrats. I think that the Republicans, including a lot of the arguments that you've been making and a lot of the arguments that you've been quoting on air this morning, have much more solid footing when they talk about process, even though I think a lot of their arguments, when looked at closely, don't stand up to scrutiny. But on the basic facts, the problem is the President of the United States did it. He is guilty. Now, whether or not that should be impeached or is impeachable, reasonable people can disagree. But it seems to me transparently obvious that his phone call wasn't perfect. I have talked to dozens of Republican congressmen and senators in the last 2 months. I haven't met one who thinks it was perfect. I haven't met one serious legal or conservative activist who, away from a camera or a microphone, has said it was perfect. And when Donald Trump says that it was perfect and insists that everybody follow that talking point, which is ludicrous, it puts the Senate majority in risk. And it makes, so we saw this morning Senator Barrasso, who I have a lot of esteem for and I think is a really swell guy, talking about how we saw nothing new in the Democrats' presentations yesterday. That's true. Part of the problem is that the senators do not have voted time and again not to hear anything new. And so we get a lot of talk from Lindsey Graham, which I think is really unpersuasive when you start looking at it. He says, what would the Democrats be saying if this was a Democratic president? Well, they'd be saying the same things that Lindsey Graham was saying when Bill Clinton was president. It's Lindsey Graham who has changed all of his positions on all of this, and sometimes quite shamefully, including his positions about Donald Trump in 2016. And so the Republicans have a great game of bluster when they talk about process and they bring up show trials and all that nonsense. But on the basic facts, the president is guilty. Now, people will say, oh, I have Trump derangement syndrome and that I'm just have my partisan blinders on or all that kind of garbage. If I was going full Jen Rubin or something like that, I would say it's obvious he should be impeached and removed. That's not my position. But it drives me crazy when I listen to all of these people talk as if the only issues here are the process arguments and the precedents, and not the basic fact that what Donald Trump did was very bad. Paying out of his own pocket for his personal lawyer to allegedly investigate corruption in Ukraine doesn't pass the smell test. And going on cameras and asking for Ukrainian government and the Chinese government to do exactly what he was trying to do sub rosa is outrageous. And Republicans should at minimum censure him for this. But because the president refuses to entertain any notion that he did anything wrong whatsoever, he's further dragging down the entire party to his defining deviancy and corruption down to whatever is just marginally below what Donald Trump does.
Now, Jonah, I don't agree with any of that. But it's not a debate, it's an interview. I want to know a couple of things. You just said this puts the Senate majority at risk. That's a political argument. It's not a legal argument or a constitutional argument.
Sure.
What do you think is your strongest field on which to fight? The political field, the legal, meaning the criminal law, or the constitutional, meaning impeachable offenses or whatever a majority of the House says they are, and a conviction is whatever 2/3 of the Senate says it is. What is your strongest field on which you want to make your argument? The political argument, the Senate majority is at risk, the legal argument, or the constitutional argument?
I think it's kind of fascinating. You left out the factual argument, just the simple facts. He did it, Hugh. He did it.
Let me ask you about that.
Okay.
Have you got the president's brief anywhere near you?
not anywhere near. I mean, sure, I can find it on my computer.
I keep arguing for footnote 565. And footnote 565, I've argued in the Washington Post, is dispositive to me. It cites Politico, Ken Vogel, David Stern. It cites the Financial Times. It cites the New York Times, all writing contemporaneous accounts prior or very close to his inauguration of Ukrainian meddling in the election. Nothing like the Russian meddling. Nothing at all like the Russian meddling. But meddling.
Okay, go on. You've let me get my say, and so go on. Yeah.
So I just want you to tell me, do you think the Ukrainians did anything bad at all to our election in 2016?
I think that is a preposterous framing of the issue because, yes, the Ukrainian ambassador wrote an op-ed objecting to Trump's suggestion that Russia had a right to Crimea. That is not meddling in an election. A handful of lone operators criticized Donald Trump or said nice things about Hillary Clinton. That is not meddling in an election. That is not hacking the DNC. That is not creating troll armies on Twitter. It's not doing anything like what Russia did. Moreover,
I didn't say that.
Trump is not referring to any of that. Any of it. That's all gaslighting and smokescreen. Trump is referring to CrowdStrike, which is an insane conspiracy theory that should trigger consideration of Article of the 25th Amendment. It is so loopy and deranged, and everybody wants to. All of the Trump's defenders want to change the argument from what Trump actually asked for in that phone call, which was CrowdStrike, to these piddling little things that Ukraine did, as if they are on par with Russia or that they justify Trump's suggestion, which was the CrowdStrike conspiracy theory does, that it was really Ukraine that actually meddled in the election.
First of all, no one I know is making that. No, John, no one's making that argument. Russia interference, which I have been arguing for months. I've never seen anyone. I saw Lindsey Graham yesterday saying Russian interference is real. No one's making the argument there wasn't Russian interference. That's changing the subject.
No, it's not. I'm saying, no, you're wrong. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is that by making this about what Ukraine actually did, and I think it's perfectly fine to criticize Ukraine and what it actually did. I think Andy McCarthy has written some good stuff on this.
Yes.
But by saying that's the issue that Trump was interested in, you're changing the facts. That's not he wasn't talking about that stuff. He brings up CrowdStrike. Defend that. Defend what he actually brought up.
I want the predicate before he's sworn in for people to understand. This is the beginning of the Ken Vogel article. Donald Trump wasn't the only presidential candidate whose campaign was boosted by officials of a former Soviet bloc country. Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. They also disseminated documents implicating a Trump aide in corruption and suggested they were investigating the matter only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton allies research damaging information on Trump and his advisors, a Politico investigation found.
Okay.
That's the predicate for the president's frame of mind on questions concerning Ukraine. So now we go to the conversation.
None of that has anything to do with CrowdStrike.
Stop.
None of it.
I know that.
It doesn't to do with CrowdStrike.
But that's not my point. My point is the president has a reason to believe that Ukraine is corrupt and attempted to influence our election, correct?
Yeah, he partly has a reason to believe that because Rudy Giuliani has been whispering in his ear and passing
this is not Rudy. This is Ken Vogel
like
and David Stern. This is not Rudy Giuliani. This is Politico and the Financial Times and the New York Times. So if he has a predicate, now that we go to the conversation. I agree that CrowdStrike is without a basis. I've never said that it isn't. But I do believe the president can ask Zelensky, under the authority of his office completely, to investigate corruption, to deal with Rudy, and to deal with Barr. And by the way, have you ever heard of Harry Hopkins?
Sure.
What was Harry Hopkins' status when he went to Great Britain in the spring of 40, and prior to that to Europe? What was his status?
His status, I can't remember off the top of my head. Was he one of the was he the secretary of, he wasn't Secretary of Agriculture. What was he?
He was originally Secretary of Commerce, but when he went in 1940, he was a friend of the president without a job, a political operator from New York, and a hard-nosed, acidic, absolutely ham-handed, iron-fisted political operator. Harry Hopkins was the Rudy Giuliani of FDR land. And so
that's a great, interesting fact. It's also it also doesn't deal with the fact with the things that Rudy Giuliani actually admitted to on CNN and to the New York Times that he has defended. The fact that Barr has said he had absolutely nothing to do with this. This was all an off-book operation. The only time Barr comes up in this is when Trump brings him up in a conversation. And then for the rest of it, it's just Rudy Giuliani being paid for, out of the president's pocket to do all of these things where Rudy Giuliani says that they are meddling in the investigation. There is no evidence to support this idea that the prosecutor that Biden pushed the prosecutor to protect his son. There is so much gaslighting and smoke screening. And again, I'm not saying that this is impeachable. I think it's impeachable. I'm not saying he should be impeached for it or that he should be removed for it. But the storyline that everybody is being forced to support, that the president did absolutely nothing wrong. Do you think his phone call was perfect?
I don't think it's perfect. I do believe it was not an offense. It's not remotely an impeachable offense. It is well within the authority of the presidency to ask a foreign government's leader to investigate corruption, and even far-flung. And
we both know he was only going after Burisma and Biden. He doesn't care.
He was going after Burisma,
this guy in the last couple weeks wants to get rid of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The idea that Donald Trump is a crusader against corruption is absurd.
You're jumping all over the place. I'm just going to the point. The presidency has powers which are extraordinary. He can kill Soleimani.
But your description of his powers do not describe what he was actually trying to do. All I'm saying is he's guilty.
He's not.
And he can easily apologize for it.
He's not guilty. Guilty is a statement that suggests he exceeded the powers of his office, and he didn't. His asking Zelensky to investigate and cooperate with Rudy Giuliani is perfectly acceptable. It wasn't perfectly stated, but I could have done the conversation very easily, and you could have. And so what I remind everyone is that if we attempt to criminalize or impeachify this conduct, every other president has to live under this standard that every conversation becomes an impeachable offense. And Jonah, isn't that a disaster?
But it wasn't just a conversation. He stopped the transfer of aid. It was an illegal act.
That is not an illegal act. It is not an illegal act. That is crazy, Jonah. It's not an illegal act. If it was an illegal act, they would cite the statute under which it was illegal in the impeachment articles. They didn't.
I'm not a huge defender of the Impoundment Act or any of that kind of stuff. But you're saying it was just a conversation. And then when I say it wasn't just a conversation, you go ballistic that it wasn't just a conversation.
I'm not going ballistic. I'm just saying it's not an impeachable offense. It's within his constitutional authority. Jonah, come back. I'm out of time. Jonah Goldberg from The Dispatch. I am a lifetime subscriber to The Dispatch. I think Jonah's exercised with me this morning. I'm not sure why. ReliefFactor.com. I'll send him some ReliefFactor.com. Let me sell my ReliefFactor.com. I'm going to get this to Jonah because I think he must be suffering from lower back pain this morning. That was sparky. ReliefFactor.com, $19.95 is the starter pack. Icarian, curcumin, omega, and resveratrol. Jonah is committed, and he's smart, and he's committed to the miracle of the West, and we agree on so much. But I like to bring everybody on to spark it up and hear the other side, and I will send them all ReliefFactor.com. Maybe. You should, however, take it before you leave the house. Don't go anywhere, America. Jim Talent is next. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside a getting gently warmer beltway. Jim Talent joins me, former senator from Missouri. Follow him at Jim Talent on Twitter. Jim, I just had Jonah Goldberg on, and Jonah came out hot, rolled out hot, as they say in the jet fighter community. Did you happen to hear that?
I did not. I was going to congratulate you on retweeting John Cornyn, but go ahead. What did Jonah have to say?
Well, Jonah wants people to think that the president's phone call was really, really bad and that he's guilty. And I have said from the beginning, I read the transcript, it's not, he didn't commit an impeachable offense. There's no offense there at all. It's not perfect because I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have said, I've got some concerns. They've been raised in Politico, New York Times, Financial Times. I need you to investigate corruption in your country. And then Zelensky would have said yes. And then no one would be talking about this. So it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't an offense. I just don't understand people who think that conversation was an offense, Jim Talent.
I couldn't agree more. You and I have said this from day one. He was entitled to investigate corruption, including the Hunter Biden incident, and he was entitled to ask Ukraine to help him in doing it. And as Cornyn tweeted and you retweeted, the fact that there are political ramifications that may have been favorable to Trump in doing this doesn't disentitle him from doing his job.
Now, Jonah's best argument is that CrowdStrike is a conspiracy theory, and it is, and it's not persuasive to me. But neither is it impeachable to mix it up in all of the other things Ukrainian bad actors did, and possibly Hunter Biden. I don't know. He hadn't been deposed. But I just keep coming back to the bottom line powers of the presidency when it comes to foreign affairs. They're almost unlimited.
Well, yes, he was pursuing investigating corruption in Ukraine, or Ukraine's attempt to corrupt our process has been a standing goal of American policy for years and years. He was entitled to ask for that. And what he was entitled to ask for, by the way, he was entitled to weigh heavily enough that he could insist on it. It's a category error that Jonah is making. If he wants to attack Trump, the policy, if he wants to say, oh, well, yes, he was pursuing this policy, but he really only had political motives, fine, but it's not in the ballpark of an impeachable offense, and from day one never has been. And that's the reason why you and I are looking at this and saying, look, it doesn't matter what the underlying facts are, because as a legal matter, this is an insufficient claim. And I think that's motivating a lot of people in the Senate. And by the way, I think there's a lot of Democrats who think that. They can't vote that way. But I think there's a lot of Democrats who think that. Look, was Obama committing an impeachable offense when he withdrew the American base in 2011, if in the back of his mind he thought, oh, this is going to be good politically for me because I'm going to be able to say I ended this commitment in the Middle East? No.
No.
It's not an impeachable offense.
No, and this is where the Constitution is having great damage done to it by this trial, and where I hope Mitt Romney and Susan Collins and those upon whom the Democrats are looking with eager eyes for support realize this has to end quickly, or we will impeachify politics. And we've always talked about the criminalization of politics. Now we are talking about the impeachification of politics, and it's a dangerous. It's like the Roman Revolution went down this road of ever-increasing craziness, Jim Talent, and this is a crazy period.
Yes, as I said, I think they made a category error. I don't know if you saw the Examiner story about the 1,000 Republican candidates who filed for Congress because they're upset about this impeachment. Here's what I think, just looking at it. I think Nancy Pelosi held this off as long as she could. I think she had to go forward with it because she was afraid of losing the House and maybe losing the speakership. And I think it's been one political problem for the Democrats after another ever since then. And I think now they're trying to salvage whatever they can tactically out of it by putting some Republican senators online on a vote that they think may be harmful to them, but I don't think will be. I think that's where we're at. And I think this is going to get dismissed in the next couple of weeks.
I think it's also a replay of Kavanaugh, in that one of the effects is to greatly strengthen the president's base of support because his supporters believe there are no tactics that are out of bounds for his opposition. And that, like the Kavanaugh personal assaults, enrages a lot of the Trump base. What do you think, Jim Talent?
Oh, yeah. I think what they perceive, and there's a real basis for it, is that they're impeaching Trump basically for exercising the powers of the presidency. In other words, they're impeaching him for being Donald Trump, and trying to exercise the powers of the office and holding him to a standard that they would never hold anybody else to. And I think there's some truth in that.
You talk to your buddies in the Senate. You're actually allowed are you allowed onto the Senate floor as a former senator during impeachment?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I'm not going to go near it. I told your producer, I told Dwayne, I've never been happier not to still be in the Senate than I am right now. I don't have to sit there and listen to it.
Jim, tell me, but really, you ought to look at it's one of those things like milk being delivered. There are very few things that are interesting about this, but the rules are interesting. You can have milk, but you can't have orange juice. And I want to know if former senators can go and bring comfort and aid to our friends like Jim Talent. Good to talk to you, my friend. Follow Jim Talent at Jim Talent. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 3. Chuck Todd is next on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's a cold day in the Beltway, but it's always warm when I get to talk to Chuck Todd about politics. He's like an oasis in a desert for me of impeachment. We get to talk politics. Chuck Todd, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I've been dedicating most of my audio comments. I always say my audio from my visual. I dedicated my entire Toddcast to Iowa, not impeachment yesterday.
Thank God.
Little counter programming, right? Little counter programming. I mean, I think there are people intensely interested in the constitutional exercise we're going through, and there are people that are intensely interested in the caucuses. So,
and that's what I want to turn to only after giving you condolences on your Packers. I did this with Representative Gallagher earlier. That was tough.
It was. I kind of expected some form of that outcome. I mean, I am more in the optimistic camp. Packers win as far as I thought they were capable of going this year. So I'm optimistic about next year.
All right, let's turn now to the question at hand. I was driving around Northern Virginia yesterday. I've already voted for Bernie Sanders. I did it on Tuesday under excused absentee.
You're becoming the most famous conservative for Bernie these days. It became such a
it was a thing,
retweeted thing on Sunday.
I can't believe that, but it was. But I did it because I really do want a choice, not an echo. If I wanted the weakest candidate, I'd vote for Elizabeth Warren. But I heard Bloomberg ads all over the place, but they were on WTOP. And for the national audience, that's our news talk station, not our conservative talk station, which is 570 AM, where Chuck and I are on right now. Do you think Bloomberg ought to be on Republican-leaning stations and appealing to disaffected Trump voters?
So essentially, I would argue, Hugh, that he is the avatar for that voter. And in fact, this seems to be his strategy, right? If you believe there, and in fact, as the numbers show it, right, that there is a new, currently in the Trump era, and this may change if when Trump is sort of out of the picture on the Republican side of things. But he has driven former suburban Republicans, right, soft social conservatives. They were never very conservative on social issues, but conservative on fiscal issues. These suburban, college-educated voters. This year are Democrats. They're acting like Democrats. That doesn't mean they're going to be Democrats in Senate race, but they're acting like Democrats in the presidential. So I view Bloomberg's strategy as sort of logical in the sense that he is their avatar, right? He's the closest person, basically a suburban sort of soft Republican, if you will, in fiscal issues, and clearly a social liberal. I just don't know if they're registered Democrats, Hugh.
Yeah,
so not everybody's
like
Virginia. So I don't think they're going to be participant. My point is, I think they may vote Democratic in November, but they've not participated in Democratic primaries before. Remember, this was the challenge you and I talked about 4 years ago with Trump. Trump's biggest constituency was for basically people not registered as Republicans. And there was a assumption that turned out to be wrong, mind you. I remember at the time, the Cruz people in particular who said, yeah, but he doesn't have the support of actual Republicans, and this will be a problem when you go to these closed primaries. Well, guess what? It turned out not to be that much of a problem for Trump. I do think this could be a problem for Bloomberg.
Now, in Virginia, having just experienced, I will explain to people, if you have an excused absence, as I do, I don't know where I'm going to be. You walk in and you say, give me the Democratic presidential primary, and they give it to you. And so I took it over, and that's great. Now, in New Hampshire, I think it's the same way. I don't know the rule in Iowa. I think you have to re-register. I would not have re-registered as a Republican. I would not have done that. It was an open primary in Virginia.
Right.
Do you think people will do what I did whenever they can?
Here's the thing. I think they'll do it if they want to vote for that person. What I don't think you'll see a lot of is strategic voting. And I say this, I remember the first time I came across strategic voting, my dad in 84.
Really?
He was in Miami. He was a registered Democrat because in the South you had to be, but he was a Reagan guy. And so in Florida, you actually had two votes. There was a straw vote for the primary, and then you voted for the delegate. And I remember my father going, so I'm going to be real strategic about this. He didn't want Gary Hart to get the nomination. He thought Gary Hart could beat Reagan. So he goes, but I like that Hart guy. I'll vote for Hart, but I'm going to vote for Jesse Jackson delegate. And he was strategic voting, right? That was his mindset. He was a strategic voter.
Yes.
And I'm saying, and I remember, I'm taking all this in and thinking, I wonder if people strategically vote. And as I've grown up, you realize they're basically 5 strategic voters in America, right? I'm half kidding, but it isn't a large constituency. But you ask about people wanting to come in. Iowa, it is a same-day registration because they're caucuses, and you're not actually having to register with the state. You're just pledging to register as a Democrat going forward, and that would allow you to participate.
Now, you and Mark have to do a segment on this. You and Mark have to do a segment on this because I believe that American intensity has been increasing almost exponentially over a period of 15 years, and that those who might not have been strategic voters 15 years ago will be. I'm sort of a quasi-strategic voter. I think people want to get in the game. I think they want to play.
By the way, I look at the Virginia primary last year. Remember, Marco Rubio almost won it.
Yes.
And why did Marco Rubio almost win? Because Northern Virginia Democrats came out in droves to stop Trump.
Yep.
And, I know people, I know neighbors who Marco Rubio is the first and only Republican they have ever voted for. Yep. But they decided it was more important to, quote unquote, stop Trump, right? So, and he almost won. By the way, that didn't mean Rubio was going to do well in Virginia, right? It was so. I do think at a place like Virginia, Northern Virginia in particular, where everybody's pretty engaged, that made sense to me that you would have some strategic voters because these were basically people that where politics is, it's a company town, right? I always say, I don't know if you have that in the Charlotte suburbs or the Denver suburbs or, that's all.
This is why I thought Mike Bloomberg ought to be advertising on my show because I got 2 million people listening right now, and those 2 million people listening right now.
I know a lot of people that would like Mike Bloomberg spend money on their shows too.
Yeah, but I also think my people hear me say, go vote for Bernie to make it a choice, not an echo. And if I say that 100 times, Frank Luntz says you need 7 impressions to make a point. They've heard me say, go vote for Bernie so that we have a choice, not an echo in the fall, because I really do want to defeat socialism once and for all and emphatically, and he's the real deal. It might sink in. Now, tell me, taking away this, where's the state of play in Iowa and New Hampshire right now, Chuck Todd?
Well, what's interesting is based on polling, and I've heard about both privately and obviously you see the public. The most interesting thing happening in Iowa right now is that the national polls and the Iowa polls are starting to align in trajectory, not necessarily in raw numbers, but in trajectory. So the point is this. What you're seeing nationally is the following. It appears both Bernie and Biden are growing a little bit, call it consolidation. Buttigieg appears to have sort of plateaued a bit, and Warren is leaking. That's what you see, and that's what's happening in Iowa too. That basically it feels as if Buttigieg has hit a ceiling. Klobuchar's on the move. The question is she's got a money issue. Basically she's running on fumes financially, and not being there may cut off her momentum. But it would not shock me if she got the Des Moines Register endorsement, and that's one of the few newspaper endorsements in a Democratic primary that can have just enough of an impact to have something. But I'll tell you this. I think when you're looking at probabilities, if you look at this in a probability way, it's more likely that Bernie and Biden are going to finish 1-2 in some order very closely. And I think it's more likely there's some sort of split decision between Bernie and Biden than any other result. Does that mean that I think Buttigieg can't win? No. Does that mean I think Warren's organization might keep her stronger than we realize? Sure. And Amy might surge. But if you're looking at trend lines, you're looking at this in probability, and if you want to play the Nate Silver probability game, it looks like right now we are on a trajectory of Bernie and Biden consolidating and finishing in some order of 1-2.
All right, then just tell me, we got 30 seconds. Is Bloomberg a reality on 3-3? I think he is. I think that we have this amount of money. It's just beyond our ability.
I think if Biden wins more than just South Carolina, he fades. I think if Biden is weak out of February, then the Bloomberg thing has to be taken more seriously.
Interesting. Chuck Todd, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Chuck Todd. Watch him every day on MSNBC. And, of course, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Let me tell you what's going on in the market, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd are lenders. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, at Sierra Pacific. All you have to do is call them up, and they'll tell you what to do with your home. 888-888-1172. They lend you the money. They don't retail off your leads. They don't try and give you a bad idea. They just tell you straight up what your house is worth, how much money you can get out of it. Do you need to consolidate debt? Do you need to pay for college? Use your house with Andrew and Todd. I've known them for years. I trust them. They've done all my loan. The 10-year Treasury is at 1.77%. The Dow was down 9 points yesterday. The Nasdaq up 12. The S&P up 1 point. Everything is red this morning as the coronavirus continues to weigh on markets abroad. The Hong Kong index down 1.5%. And overnight, an S&P is down 5 this morning. Nasdaq down 2.5. Dow down 54. It's going to be a rough day on Wall Street at the open. Time to check in with AndrewandTodd.com. Answer a couple questions. They'll be right back to you. 888-888-1172. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Dave Mason, the Dart Gun song. If you're my age, Dave Mason, we just disagree as a dart gun. Can just drop you. The President of the United States is tweeting. "42 minutes ago, the president quoted Rush Limbaugh on Fox and Friends. Rush said Schiff doesn't have a case telling the truth, so he's manufacturing things. 39 minutes ago, the president quoted former Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles. There is no evidence of a crime. The president added the crimes were committed by the other side. 35 minutes ago, the president tweeted, attorney generals from 21 states are urging the Senate to reject impeachment. They say articles have legal and factual problems, and the Democrats' case sets a dangerous historical precedent, quotes all in caps now. Even an unsuccessful effort to impeach the president undermines the integrity of the 2020 election because it weaponizes a process that should only be initiated in exceedingly rare circumstances and should never be used for partisan purposes. He's quoting Heather Childers on Fox News. The Democrats, writes the president, are trying hard to damage Republicans prior to the election. 32 minutes ago, he added, in an impeachment, you can't use a work of fiction as a theory for the case, filling in gaps with presumptions against the president. It was a weak presentation, self-indulgent, and he didn't deliver the goods, said Robert Charles. He went on to quote him more. The House Democrats would not give us lawyers, the president writes, or not one witness, but now demand that the Republican Senate produce the witnesses and that the House never saw it or ever asked for. They had their chance, adds Trump, but they pretended to rush. Most unfair and corrupt hearing in congressional history. 27 minutes ago, he added, no matter what you give to the radical left, do nothing, Democrats, it will never be enough. And then 24 minutes ago, the Democrats and Shifty Schiff, whose presentation to the Senate was loaded with lies and misrepresentations, are refusing to state that the Obama administration withheld aid from many countries, including Ukraine, Pakistan, Philippines, Egypt, Honduras, and Mexico. A witch hunt. President being very active. Meanwhile, I've got Adam Schiff from 2017 on This Week on ABC talking about the fact that indeed, this is apropos of my conversation with Jonah Goldberg last hour, which we will post the audio and transcript of. Ukraine did meddle in the 2016 election. They did nothing remotely close to what the Russians did, but they did meddle. Adam Schiff admitted it. Cut number 36.
I've heard they've also pointed to this to this issue with the Democratic Party and the Ukrainian embassy. This comes from a story in Politico that ran in January. The headline: Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. And I want to read from the article. A Ukrainian American operative who was consulting for the DNC met with top officials in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington in an effort to expose ties between Trump, top campaign aide Paul Manafort, and Russia. The Ukrainian efforts had an impact in this race, helping force Manafort's resignation and advancing the narrative that the Trump campaign was deeply connected to Ukraine's foe to the east, Russia. So let me ask you, I understand Hillary Clinton lost, and I understand this effort was not as elaborate as the Russian effort, but was it acceptable, or would it have been acceptable for the Democrats to accept help from the Ukrainian government in this campaign?
No, it would be appropriate for the Democrats to accept help from the Ukrainian government. But I think if you look at the Politico article, and we're talking about just a single article here, if you accept all the facts in the article, the scale of what the Russians did is not comparable to anything in that article. If it were, the comparable analogy would be that the Ukrainian president directed the Ukrainian intelligence agencies to steal, to hack Donald Trump's campaign, steal emails, publish them, directed a social media army to influence the election,
No one
and
is
sat down.
arguing that it's the same as Russia. I'm arguing it's a predicate for the president's request to Zelensky. That's all I'm arguing. That's all they have to argue. End of matter. No offense, much less an impeachable offense. End of game. End of story. Coming up, Nick, Kirstof, Sheryl, WuDunn, and more impeachment on this morning edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. that it appears quite frequently in a brand new book, Tightrope. Back America, it's Hugh Hewitt. The reason I am playing Stairway to Heaven is that it appears quite frequently in a brand new book, Tightrope, Americans Reaching for Hope. It's by Nicholas Kirstof, Sheryl, WuDunn, and they are together with me this morning to talk about Tightrope, and they'll be back tomorrow and the next day as well, because as I said when I live tweeted the book when I was reading it, this may be the most grief-laden book I have read in a decade, but I also think it's very important to read. So Nicholas and Sheryl, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Hugh.
I mispronounced WuDunn, by the way. I'm sorry about that, Sheryl. I always do it. I'm sort of dyslexic when it comes to names. Let's start with Tightrope. Nicholas, let me ask you, this must have been very difficult to write, and you can explain to people why I think that.
Oh, it was wrenching. Look, I spent much of my career reporting on humanitarian crises abroad, and meanwhile, we were coming back to my little hometown, beloved hometown of Yamhill, Oregon, a little farm town of about 1,000 people, and we found a humanitarian crisis unfolding there. And in particular, I'm close to the people on my old school bus number 6. And, Hugh, about a quarter of the people on my old school bus have passed away from drugs, alcohol, suicide, and related pathologies. And so we tried to tell the story of the disintegration of working-class American communities, partly through the narrative of my old school bus.
So, Sheryl, WuDunn, why would you go along for this ride? Because this is not your world. It's so different from your world of New York and international coverage and journeying with Nick places far and wide. I can't get the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt to go back with me to Warren, Ohio, just to see the family. You had to go in and sort of sheep dip yourself in the despair of this community. It's upside too, but it's despair. Why'd you throw in?
Well, first of all, I have been going back to Yamhill every year for 3 decades, and so I became part of the community whether I liked it or not. I actually have helped shear sheep, so I've had lots of experience working on the farm. And it also, as a foreign correspondent, I was coming back. I had a little bit more distance between myself and the people that, although I've met them over the years, I didn't ride the school bus. So it was I had a little different perspective. And what I noticed was really stunning. I had been traveling around the world, in the developing world, and I would tell people that the degree of poverty, in the developing world is of an order of magnitude that is far greater than you will ever see in the U.S. And that's what I had believed, because we were reporting deeply in these foreign countries. And I come to Yamhill, and I could actually look at with a reporter's lens, and I was really wrong. I mean, look, here in the U.S., we may have electricity, we have plumbing, people may have flat-screen TVs, but what's really a paradox is the fact that so many people around the rest of the world are desperately trying to come to the U.S. because they believe in the American dream. And here in Yamhill, and actually elsewhere in the U.S. as well, there are people, Americans, floundering because for them, that dream is broken.
I'm talking with Nicholas Kirstof, the New York Times, Sheryl WuDunn, his co-author and spouse, about the new book, Tightrope, Americans Reaching for Hope. For backstory for my audience, from 1999 to 2016, I served as a member of the Orange County, California Children and Families Commission. We spent $20 to $30 million a year focused on children 0 to 5, getting them healthy and ready to learn, and that meant poverty spending, poverty programs, innovation. I wrote about it in my last book, and nobody cares. I can't get anyone to pay any attention to the fact that there are deep pockets of poverty in Orange County. And so, Nick, I'm wondering if you can get anybody to care on your side of the political aisle, because I just don't think people believe this exists.
Hugh, it is so frustrating, and the focus that you had in Orange County on kids 0 to 5 is exactly the right one. It's where we have the most leverage to bring about change. When I think about, what would have made a difference for the kids on my old school bus, it would have been investing early in those kids. And yet, we've done so much over the last 50 years to improve a lot of the elderly. And yet, in some ways, when I look at Yam Hill, kids are in more trouble than ever because they're often now raised in really toxic, broken households with drugs around, with chaos, and it just breaks my heart. So, can Tightrope make a difference? Can it help put these issues on the agenda? I don't know, but I do know that you're never going to hit a windmill unless you actually tilted one.
That's exactly right. That's what 17 years, once a month, go tilt at a windmill. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. We had the assistance of Bridgespan, which is probably the preeminent consulting firm in America, and they kept coming back to something you both referred to at the end in your policy prescriptions, most of which I don't agree with, but some of which I do, which is layering of resources upon the deeply, desperately poor children. Don't just do one intervention, do many. And I found for the first time in Tightrope, and Sheryl, I'll send this to you, the concept of ACE, adverse childhood experiences. That has, it occurred to me, that's what we've been doing for 17 years in Orange County, is dealing with various adverse childhood experiences, but studying it holistically is not something I've seen undertaken until the end of Tightrope.
That is really important. And we also learned from pediatricians and talking to some very prominent people. It was very enlightening because an adverse childhood experience is something like a divorce. And yes, so many people, one in three families, or 50% in some states, parents get divorced, and that has an impact on their kids. So it's a very common experience. The problem happens when you start building up those ACEs, as we call them, in your childhood years. So when you have 3 or 4 or 5. And what's really striking is that, as they pile on, we can actually predict with pretty good accuracy what the impact will be if nothing is done to this child, years later. They won't necessarily graduate from high school. They will have a troubled, teenage years. They will probably end up in jail. That wouldn't be surprising. But what was very surprising is that it also affects your health. This also leads to higher obesity rates, to heart disease, to other chronic diseases, which has a huge impact on costs for healthcare for the society. So what these pediatricians and these scientists are arguing is that let's address these issues when the children are young. First of all, it's less costly, and it is also much easier to recorrect and put them on the right course.
When we come back tomorrow, we're going to talk about what happens when you have these adverse childhood experiences. The conclusion of that, the spoiler, is deaths of despair. We'll discuss the specifics of that tomorrow with Nick Kirstof, Sheryl, WuDunn. Tightrope is the book, Americans Reaching for Hope. And thanks for being here. Come back tomorrow for the rest of that. Now, back to impeachment. I haven't played for you yet today. I've been saving it. Chris Wallace of Fox News actually summed up what Adam Schiff did yesterday, I think, quite effectively in this cut. I want you to hear it. Cut 19, Chris Wallace, Fox News, talking about Adam Schiff misrepresenting what Mick Mulvaney had been saying.
I just want to make one point about a specific line that Adam Schiff used a lot. He kept using the line from Mick Mulvaney, get over it, and saying, well, are we going to just get over it? Before I interviewed Mick Mulvaney the week of his problematic news conference, I went back and looked at that statement in detail, and that's not what Mick Mulvaney said at all. He did say get over it, but he was talking specifically about the fact that there is politics in foreign policy, and specifically that when Barack Obama is conducting his foreign policy, it's going to have a different political flavor and a different policy agenda than when Donald Trump is. And each president, they're elected, is fulfilling his mandate. He wasn't saying that this kind of quid pro quo, get over it, just accept it. He was talking specifically about the idea of policy and politics in a foreign policy agenda. So, quite frankly, and I think that Adam Schiff made an effective argument for his side of the case, but he completely misrepresented what Mick Mulvaney said when he said get over it.
That's one of many misrepresentations. I have to disagree with Chris Wallace. I do not believe it was a completely effective case. I think it was a... look, but to be honest, some people did. Jeff Toobin on CNN talking to 1 million people, half the number I'm talking to right now, just praised Adam Schiff. I want you to hear the other side, too. Cut number 17.
I thought it was dazzling. I thought the way he wove through both the facts of the case and the historical context was really remarkable. It was the second best courtroom address, since it's like a courtroom, that I ever heard, after a prosecutor named Jonathan Benedict in the Michael
Stop. We don't need to go out down memory lane with Jeffrey Toobin. But in fact, it wasn't dazzling. It was like watching all of your own personal favorite movies that other people don't enjoy, alone in your basement, but making 100 people watch them with you. It was Adam Schiff's home movies. And then Josh Hawley cut to the bottom of what it really was. Cut number 29.
He's basically saying that we can't have any faith in our democratic process. Therefore, we need to overturn the results of the last election. I mean, that's an exceptional argument. I'll be interested to see if that gains traction. I think it really shows also the Russia fixation. I mean, how many times did he mention Russia and Vladimir Putin? And I really think for the Democrats, it's becoming apparent that this is really all one thing. They continue to buy into the Russia conspiracy theory that Russia rigged our last election somehow, that the last election was illegitimate, and that President Trump is somehow fixing to steal this next election. I think that's a crazy conspiracy theory, but really their whole case is built on that, and he came back to it over and over and over. And I anticipate this, and we said this is what we're going to hear for the next 3 days.
You're right, and it's going to go all on today, and I don't think anyone's watching. I haven't seen the overnights. They had dropped to 6 million people already. They had dropped way down on the first day. I think yesterday nobody watched, but we'll see. One thing that was watched, I want you to know, the Planters Peanut Super Bowl ad was released. Goodbye, Mr. Peanut. Cut number 30.
I just died in your arms tonight. Oh, look out! Oh, abandonment! We're too heavy. Oh.
Matt, let go. No, you let go. Hey, Mr. Peanut, no, you don't. Don't do it, Mr. Peanut. No! Maybe he'll be all right. Maybe not.
And Planters, when you see it, Planters kills off Mr. Peanut in the Super Bowl pregame. It went viral yesterday. It makes you happy a little bit on another day of impeachment. You know what you need today? You need this. ReliefFactor.com. I took it in the first hour. I reminded you last hour. I'm telling you again, if you're one of those few people, you're one of those handful of people who are getting in their cars on the West Coast right now, you're in Seattle, you're in L.A., you're in San Francisco, or you're heading there, actually. You're starting in Moreno Valley. You're starting, in Canada, heading down to Seattle, or you're in, Grass Valley, and you're going to San Francisco, and you've got 2 hours in the car ahead of you. You should have taken your Relief Factor before you left the house, and if you're only 2 minutes away, turn around and go back and get it. I can't help you if you won't take your ReliefFactor.com. Pete and Seth Talbot from the Seattle region, by the way, and the wonderful guys who have founded HonorBoundCoffee.com. And go sign up for that today. They got a special 2-for-1 offer at the beginning, HonorBoundCoffee.com. ReliefFactor.com supports the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that make that commute that you are now dreading, except for my dulcet tones. Very, very difficult on your back. Don't deal with it another day. Start joining the tens of thousands of people who do what I do every morning, which is take ReliefFactor.com. Coming right back after the break, a little Ted Cruz on impeachment to end your day. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh-niverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.HughNiverse.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Just to put a cap on what happened yesterday, impeachment, and what will happen today in impeachment, I want you to hear Ted Cruz last night talking about impeachment yesterday. Cut 31, Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
Well, we're in the first day of the Democratic manager's opening arguments, and one of the realities that's already setting in is just a few hours into their opening arguments, they're already repeating the same points they made for 13 hours yesterday. And I suspect the Democrats, through a fit yesterday, insisted they needed at least 3 full days to present the arguments. I think we're going to see an awful lot of repetition, making the same points over and over again. There were 2 things in particular today that I thought were highly notable. Number one, several of the Democratic managers made the case that Ukraine, denying Ukraine military aid, endangered lives, was a tremendous blow to American national security and was wrong. Even a moment of delaying military aid to Ukraine risked lives. There's an old saying that hypocrisy is the tribute vice pays to virtue. And this is a really powerful example, because if there is such a compelling national security interest to give military aid to Ukraine, then what do these House Democrats have to say about the years that Barack Obama refused to give lethal military aid to Ukraine? And in fact, I traveled to Ukraine in 2014, came back and urged Barack Obama to give lethal military aid to Ukraine. The Obama administration refused to do so. Instead, they sent blankets and MREs, but they wouldn't give lethal aid. On the other hand, the Trump administration has given Javelin missiles, has sold Javelin missiles that can take out Russian tanks. And so if the House manager's argument is correct, I guess the consequence is, under their argument, maybe they should have impeached Obama if not giving military aid to Ukraine was a deep threat to U.S. national security.
And then Ted Cruz, on a different part of yesterday, summarized it. A lot of people saw this, but the senator is absolutely right. Cut number 2.
I think the House managers made a very serious strategic error today. Adam Schiff's arguments to open the day today directly drew into question Hunter Biden and made not only his testimony relevant, which it already was, but it is now critical, because the House Democrats have built their entire case on the proposition that any investigation into Bipartisan corruption was a sham, that it was completely debunked. The problem is there is very significant prima facie evidence of corruption. Hunter Biden, the son of the then sitting president, Joe Biden, was being paid $83,000 a month, $1 million a year. This is someone with no background in oil and gas, no experience. And at the same time, Joe Biden has publicly admitted that he threatened Ukraine. He withheld or threatened to withhold $1 billion of aid unless and until Ukraine fired the prosecutor that was potentially investigating the company on which his son served on the board. If the House manager's case is based on the allegations of corruption concerning Hunter Biden and Joe Biden being a sham, then it is directly relevant. And I got to say, the need for the Senate to hear the testimony of Hunter Biden and the need for the Senate to grant the White House lawyers the ability to take that testimony has become all the more relevant.
Ted Cruz is quite the lawyer, and he is listening for traps that Schiff is laying for himself and Nadler is laying for himself, and there are a lot of them. Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, summed it up again. Cut number 29.
He's basically saying that we can't have any faith in our democratic process. Therefore, we need to overturn the results of the last election. I mean, that's an exceptional argument. I'll be interested to see if that gains traction. I think it really shows also the Russia fixation. I mean, how many times did he mention Russia and Vladimir Putin? And I really think for the Democrats, it's becoming apparent that this is really all one thing. They continue to buy into the Russia conspiracy theory that Russia rigged our last election somehow, that the last election was illegitimate, and that President Trump is somehow fixing to steal this next election. I think that's a crazy conspiracy theory, but really their whole case is built on that, and he came back to it over and over and over. And I anticipate this, and we said this is what we're going to hear for the next 3 days.
And then finally, Mike Rogers, former House Chair of the Intel Committee on CNN, really summing it up. Cut number 34.
This is a big difference in this way. There is a lot of extraneous information in there that wouldn't be admissible in court. There's lots of that flowery language that isn't evidence, but they're trying to make their narrative politically. And this is a big, blunt political instrument. And so I think their burden is to prove to the American public their case. And I thought it was very disjointed today. If you're just an average citizen trying to get a handle on this thing, I think it was really hard to follow.
Stop right there, Mike Rogers. Amen. It was a mess yesterday. And all the people who were saying it was the greatest show on earth, they're all Twitter universe trapped. They're people who are living on a different planet than you and me who go to work today and do our jobs. We check in when we can. The senators have lost interest. They're wandering around the table. They're going to the cloakroom. They're drinking milk. We're having jokes about this. It's a giant joke. This is day 2 of the joke ahead. Starts a little bit later. Day 2 of the joke is the shift now. There's one more day of the joke tomorrow. The joke goes on, but nobody's laughing with the Democrats. They're laughing at the Democrats. What a sham. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. We'll see you all tomorrow on day 3 of the Democrats' joke, right back here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.